Hey, you're watching Just Press Record on the Cultish Creative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matt Ziegler, and on each episode, I invite not one, but two guests to join me for a conversation-style interview. These are smart, funny, usually a little eccentric, frequently a little weird, often very online friends of mine, and even if you don't understand what they have in common at first, just wait, because I've seen some common ground between them that I've been dying to ask them about, and just press record. The show practically named itself, seriously. So subscribe, like, comment below, and stick around at the end of the disclosures, disclaimers, and reminders, and, come find me, cultishcreative.com, at cultishcreative on Twitter, and by name on LinkedIn. Without further ado, throw your seatbelts on. Let's make it a record. Okay, I am pressing record now. You're watching Just Press Record on the Cultish Creative YouTube channel. Today we're talking work. We're talking job paths. We're talking whether you're older or younger or anywhere in between, the reality that work has changed, and it's changed a lot. So let's get on with this. I have two incredible guests today. If Guy Fieri is the mayor of Flavortown, then this guest is the esteemed town councilman of the Registered Investment Advisory Borough. And if Guy Smiley is America's favorite game show host, according to Sesame Street, then this guest has to be America's favorite glass-blowing CEO, according to Sesame Boulevard. And finally, if I'm a guy in Penn Woods, Pennsylvania, this guy is probably listening to Just a Girl in, Indiana, somewhere like that. And I have no doubt, but this is Core Planning Zone. Mr. Guy Penn, say hello.
Thank you, Matt. I've never heard such an intro before. I'm super thrilled. Like I was saying, I have nothing here in front of me other than some enthusiasm. I know you are highly skilled at a lot of things, but bringing a good conversation out of people is up there. So that's where I'm gonna leave it.
Oh, we're gonna have fun because, and now our other guest, what's better? This is a very niche reference that I don't even know if you're gonna get, but it's worth me making. What's better than Richard Hell in television than Lindsay Bell on television? What's better than Lindsey Vonn on the slopes than Lindsay Bell busting job tropes? And what's better than Taco Bell thinking outside the bun? Why Lindsay Bell? Because no one's better, bar none. Lindsay Bell, author of the Shift newsletter, which I love, chief strategist at 248 Ventures. Say hello, Lindsay.
Oh, well, hello, Matt. I've never received an intro like that either. And you might have to send that to me. That could be my new bio.
My gift to both of you for joining me today is I will gladly give you those things for the bio. And wait, Guy Fieri telling me if I said his name wrong.
He's listening right now.
I'm sure he is. As the mayor of Flavortown, he's got to collect these taxes somewhere. Okay, so I want to talk about work. Lindsay, you're in the Shift newsletter, which I highly, highly recommend people subscribe to. You're writing about this on a weekly basis, and it's fascinating. One thing I love is you really differentiate what's happened with jobs and how we approach them, both at the organizational level and the individual level post-COVID. So can you just highest level overview, what the heck just happened with COVID, and why do you see that as kind of like a demarcation point for how we go to work?
Well, I think COVID just kind of woke us all up, but I think there was a lot of things in play, a lot of changes going on way before COVID. I like to kind of call the starting point the financial crisis, but even there were changes happening even before then. But overall, I think we keep chugging along. Our economy keeps moving into this knowledge-based economy. We started it as an industrial revolution type of economy, moved to services. Now we're a knowledge-based economy, but the systems that we're working in are based on that industrial type of economic environment. So you've got the hierarchy, you've got the traditional career path or the corporate ladder that you're supposed to be following. And all of these things, when they come together, they're no longer meshing because we're completely different, that we're offering different services and products and things like that. So I think where we find ourselves now is a changed human being. By the way, our preferences and behavior have changed as well, meeting with these changed corporations and the changed way that corporations work. And we're just kind of waking up to, in a sense, to what the future is going to be. It's going to be very different. It's already changed significantly and it's going to continue to change. And I think we're grappling with that because because change is not something that's comfortable for anybody, but it's something that we cannot ignore at this point.
It's really wild to think about. I love this, the knowledge-based to industrial-based component of this. And that's sort of where we're stuck. We still have these old relic systems that are holding out. Guy, I know, say for just a second, like what core planning is, but then I think you're actually living this, because I feel like you're one of the professionals in the investment space, in the investment advisory space, who's building a platform that says like, all these old systems are fine, but they need to get overhauled.
You know, I'm going to rewind a little bit to say Lindsay nailed something really important that I want to make sure we don't overlook. It's not the thing that's the thing. It's not the pandemic that was the thing. It revealed the thing in a way. It revealed something we've been wanting. And we're in this beautiful, complex, adaptive system. And, all these systems require some kind of homeostasis. It requires something to keep some continuity until that homeostasis is removed. So let's say we'll call that the pandemic. Then evolution can kind of rapidly happen. Like we as people evolved into what we want and what our expectations of our own happiness, is. And so when you think about that, it's not necessarily of like, I'm afraid to make this change. It's change happened. So that removed our own fears to do it to us. And now we're free to adapt. So it's more of like a permission in a sense. And what we're doing at Core, I like to call it just permission to be yourself, permission to do the work you want to do. And not that people really need this external permission, but we put it on ourselves. And I'm guilty of it. We've all been guilty of it at some point, of having to grant yourself permission to do what you've been wanting to do. And like Lindsay said, it's not the thing, it's just that event kind of revealed what was already there.
Lindsay, what do you think about that word permission and where it shows up?
I love the word permission, because I feel like you just took the words right out of my mouth, Guy, in that I think that the place that we're at is that we've woken up to the fact that we have permission. We have permission to use our imaginations about what we want to do in the workplace. We have permission to take back control of our career trajectory. We've given ourselves permission to have a choice, to have a say in the matter. And I think that really stemmed from during the pandemic. What came after that is the Great Resignation, right? And I think what happened there, it was more than just people quitting their jobs and taking new jobs. I think it turned on a light bulb, or it was a light switch that went off for a lot of people, in that they realized, wait a minute, I thought I had control over my career or what I'm doing at work or whatever it is. And I haven't. I've just been following the rules, I've been just on auto drive, just doing what I'm supposed to do, going down the path that I'm supposed to be on that career path, climbing that ladder to get to the top that I thought I wanted. But I realized that path leaves me no room for creativity, doesn't let me use my imagination, and it required me to relinquish some control. Whereas in the Great Resignation, we realized, we can find new jobs. Not only can we find new jobs, we can decide when we want to quit. We can decide and have the negotiating power over not just pay, but work-life balance, remote work, all these other things. So it opened the conversation. And I think that light bulb went off for people. And like you said, maybe it was just that the homeostasis was removed and it woke people up. And now we're at a place where we have that permission to take back control of our careers or our work or whatever.
What's that say about creativity and creativity's role in evolution? And I'm not digging for some scientific explanation, Guy, but there's this beautiful thing about creativity in evolution of wanting to create the next thing and all of a sudden having a break that allows room. You're a man surrounded by a bunch of paintings and other things that you didn't buy off of Etsy or wherever the hell I got my fake Banksy here.
That's not fake. Come on.
Oh yeah, it's an original, right?
Creativity, it's part of us. I think it's undeniable that humans are just inherently creative, but we don't give ourselves room for it to emerge from us. So the more efficient we make our systems, the more time we have in our own minds to express that creativity, it tends to come out if we allow it to. So I'm not going back to permission, the whole time, but it's allowing ourselves that headspace to do so. allowing ourselves to put in 6 hours today instead of 9 to get our things accomplished, to let other things kind of happen. Go for a walk without a headset. Do things to let your brain be free. And it's the busy culture, I think, is breaking down for a lot of us, and that's a positive. The busier we are, the less time we have to let our mind wander. And it's that wandering where we can come up with breakthroughs and just letting something that already exists in us emerge from us, because it's already there. And it was whittling away the things that were already in the way.
Lindsay, if I think about this from the organizational standpoint, organizations have invested years, if not decades, if not eons at this point, to put these structures in place where, oh, no, you have to ask your boss for permission. Oh, no, you have to do these things. From the organization's perspective, what does this fracture mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're having real conversations about this right now. Their HR departments are talking about it. They have outside recruiting companies coming in, or research and consulting companies come in to talk to them about it, because they see and they feel a change. There can be some angst in the corporate workplace between the employer and the employee right now. And it's because both are experiencing so much change, and we're having a hard time to like kind of find that clear path forward. So I think corporations are discussing this. They're thinking about the path forward, but I think what they probably don't want to hear, that I think they need to reconsider, is that giving some power back to the employee, or empowering the employee to have some sort of latitude and space and time for creativity will benefit the organization overall. Because oftentimes what we've seen, there's been a lot of research in the past, right, about giving employees ownership. So giving your public company, give your employees shares. And I think that resonates with some employees. I don't think it resonates with all employees, because we haven't done the greatest service of explaining what stock ownership is to, some lower level employees, is what I'm referencing. And so I think, though, that if you give the employee ownership in the sense of creativity and the ability to innovate and the ability to have freedom to work maybe on their own time within reason, I think that that could create an environment that benefits organizations, while they still kind of, they have the outline of the organization, but you allow folks inside to utilize their creativity. And I do want to be careful with the word creative or creativity or things like that, because it can be a turnoff. Like for me, that word gets me excited. I think for all three of us, that word probably gets us excited. I mean, it's in the title of your blog, right? But it can be a turnoff for the analytical folks. The people that are constantly thinking in spreadsheets or whatnot, and that think in black and white. They might be a little bit scared to thinking in gray scale or even color. So we have to be careful with that word. And I think what it is just like, you see the younger generations, and I think you're going to get to this at some point, is what they're looking for is autonomy or agency in what they do. And I think that's the way that we need to show them their ability to use creativity. And it's something that does exist in all of us. And I know you're a fan of Rick Rubin, and, I'm a fan of his book. I have it in front of me, The Creative Act. I just happen to have it on my desk. But I just want to read. He says, creativity is not a rare ability. It's not difficult to access. It's a fundamental aspect of being human. It's our birthright, and it's for all of us. And I think, too, as humans, we are starting to understand that, and we're starting to accept that. But we're in the process of synthesizing what that means for us and what that means for us in the workplace too.
Fantastically said. I have to drop it in here because it's next to Rick Rubin. It's the Natalie Nixon definition of creativity. I think she's so important for the workplace literature on this, but her definition is creativity is the ability to toggle between wonder and rigor in order to solve problems and deliver novel value. So important in the workplace, because if we're thinking about this underneath, and Guy, this is where I want you to step back into this, autonomy, agency, and I think authenticity belongs in this too. This goes back to the permission point.
And again, Lindsay had a huge point there that we don't talk about a lot, which is language.
Okay.
To say the word creativity means different things to different people. It could also mean, if you're a linear thinker, like let's say the hypothetical, coder, or someone who might be afraid to step out, it's solving a problem with what's in front of you. That's creative. Everyone has their own creative genius in some way. Maybe we're afraid to use that language because it seems too free. And sometimes unlimited autonomy can be scary too. So there's balance of autonomy to what matters to us, to come up with the solutions that are in front of us and solve these problems. But when you think about authenticity, it's, again, I know, go back to permission, but it's allowing ourselves the safety to be ourselves. And then when we are free to do that, we're also going to be more creative naturally. And like I said, creativity can be different things to different people. And if we're approaching someone who is more the industrial mindset, very linear in their thought process, for them, creativity is just pulling in resources to solve a problem. It could be other people who solve this problem with us. And it's not us having to say, here's how it's going to be done. It's us granting them the permission to say, you're good at this. You think this way. Can you help me solve this? That's a creative solution for maybe a non-creative thinker.
Here's a weird question. Is looking backwards, Lindsay first on this one, then Guy, you can comment on this too. Like looking backwards, what he just said about there was an old form of creativity that worked. It was finding the available resources within the company, within whatever else to make it work. And now it feels like those types of solutions in and of themselves, how they're valued has changed. Is that part of the gap too? This bridging of industrial creativity versus knowledge-based creativity? Any thought on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I think as humans, we've gotten smarter and more intelligent over the years too. So many more of us are educated with college degrees and things like that. And not only that, the internet gives us access to so much knowledge. So I think that we're able to be creative and think outside of the box in much different ways than that linear path. And I think a lot of, because of that, because we're exposed to so much different types of creativity, that a lot of us want more. We want to have more flexibility than just saying, I need to bring someone else into this. And so I think that there's an ability to think more creatively, I guess I would say. But I think for the linear thinkers too, they have to be careful, because when you pull other people in, then it becomes a game of managing time and responsibilities. And I think we've seen that happen a lot over the last 5 years, especially probably 10, 15 years since the financial crisis, when organizations had to get lean. They didn't have a choice. They got too bloated before they got really lean. And it took them a long time to start adding more employees and to take on more work. And so I think they got the mentality of essentialism. It's a book that everybody's reading now, and like to the detriment, I think, sometimes of the organization and also the employee experience, because when you're working in an essential basis, you only have so many people. And so to pull other people in to help you solve a problem, it stretches everybody a little too thin. And then we're not focused on exactly what we do well, and what the organization needs. So I don't know. I don't think I answered your question.
I think it's really tough. It's really tough. And I'll posit another theory in a second, but Guy, I want you to fumble with this for a second. That the difference between like industrial creativity and knowledge-based creativity.
Do we have to have a difference between the two, or are there different moments where one will be more appropriate than the other? And I don't know. I don't pretend to have an answer. I'm just trying to reframe. Can one exist without the other, or are we in kind of this yin yang scenario of that they both have to be there? You have to have some nonlinear creativity to solve certain problems, and you have to have a linear process to solve like real world things. Like we still have bills to pay. Like we can't abandon that path either, but to have kind of this harmony between them. So I don't know if it's just a back and forth, or they just need to find a creative way to synchronize those two And it comes down to people, and not just groups of people who see things differently, but people who can see things differently. So Lindsay, you've had a lot of cool chapters and done several cool things that you probably have multiple lenses by which you can view things. And that's a huge strength, that not everyone has that ability to see things through multiple lenses. And they may have been on one trajectory for so long, they've got one pair of lenses, and that's limiting. So it's waking up to that is a challenge. How do you know what you don't know? I mean, it's impossible, but you just start with acknowledging that, hey, maybe I have one set of lenses on and I need a few more.
Lindsay, is there a lens aspect, like from the modern creative with agency employee? Do you almost have to know how to be creative in the industrial way and the knowledge way? Or is that the definition of knowledge way, that I can see through multiple lenses? How does that strike you?
Well, I think it depends on what your job is or what your function is too. Because if
Okay.
I think of like an accountant, like, yes, they have a very specific task that they need to do well, right? And it is pretty black and white. If granted, it's great, like Guy kind of mentioned, if that accountant, started out one part of the organization and moved to another part and to another part, now he sees three different parts of the business and can kind of tap into how they can maybe see synergies or operate more efficiently together from a numbers perspective. There's that level of creativity. But then there's also, this is why this is such a complex topic too, because there's the individual too that you have to remember. Some accountants just want to be in their one division and they're cool with that. And as long as they're moving up and they're being rewarded, whether it's through appreciation or other ways for what they do, they're good, So it's not everybody wants to stretch and be super creative, and there's certain functions that don't need it either. So it is a complex. It makes the problem much more complex. And I think that as an organization, you have to think about what departments do I need more creativity in versus others. And then I think organizations also, in one way they're thinking about this, is working more horizontally, becoming decentralized. And so I think as they think through that, they are actually inserting creativity into the process, but it's just not for everyone. And so I think there's no just one answer to your question, is what I'm saying.
This is fantastic. And I thought for a second that you were about to make an accountant's being appreciated, like appreciation, depreciation joke. And I got so excited. And I forgive you for not landing that plane. I'll process that on my own time, but it was so beautiful. It was right there. I just want to point that out. So on the horizontal thing, and Guy, I know you've thought a lot about this with your company. There's like these scale limitations to this complexity. And I think knowing how and you're hinting at this, Lindsay, how not just like the person is the person, but then how we stack other jobs, roles, responsibilities on top or horizontally to that person, and think about scale. Do you have a way that you sort of think about that? Like, once it's more than just one person, how does that happen, Guy, in your mind?
The quicker the feedback systems, I think the better we're going to be when we have multiple people involved.
Okay.
And I want to bring in something Lindsay said that's actually important to hear too, is creativity in and of itself isn't something that if you have more of it, you're somehow superior in some way, because you can be a very linear, very industrial, and I'm not picking on CPAs today. We love our CPAs, but
we have a lot of goodwill.
They can be very, CPAs. Very good at that, which is critically important. You have to have that, and they could be having an amazing and wonderful career doing that. But the fact that they're human is what's going to make them better at that. And this whole and I know I'm kind of drifting a little bit, I apologize, but this argument of, well, linear systems thinking is going to be replaced by autonomous algorithm. But wouldn't that be a shame if everything was done perfectly all the time? And wouldn't it be a shame if like safe human serendipitous error didn't reveal flaws in the systems? So letting humans still run these types of processes that's going to make these systems less fragile, because small accidental human errors are going to be important to progress. So much of evolution is based upon like minor errors or huge errors and breakdowns. And that's where humans are going to be absolutely critical for things to actually progress, is through these micro errors, through human serendipity. So it's like accidental creativity in a way. It doesn't have to be something like premeditated. It's, oh, I screwed this up. Hey, how do we fix this? Now that fix made the system better.
What do you think about
Did I
that,
even answer your
Lindsay?
question at all? I totally
Well,
went off. Sorry about that.
no, you did, because I'm going to recenter this for Lindsay, but you did, because we're thinking about how complexity grows as an organization grows and scales, because this becomes the thorny issue with this stuff. Even if we take 10 CPAs and we put them all in a firm together, or 10 financial advisors, or 10 economists, or 10 landscapers, complexity comes from more relationships and how you solve for what still gives people room to be human. Just any comment on Guy's comments there, Lindsay, or just what it means to be human as organizations get bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of being human is Guy made the point about creating serendipitous errors that reveal flaws in the system. But it's also, talking to, I think both of you know this really well, just talking to your customers and knowing what they like and don't like about your product or service, right? And they're thinking of things that you're not thinking of. So I think the more people, hopefully they're not all CPAs, but we got a little diversity in the way.
Wait, hold on. You're pointing out a really important thing, and this is why you're a part of this conversation here, because you can point this obvious thing out. Not just talking to each other to drive the progress, but actually getting market feedback too. Because there's a different type of feedback that I'm like, guys like, Matt, you're screwing up the process again. And I'm like, I know. But if it's Lindsay, the customer, is like, hey, both you guys are dropping the ball, that's a different type of feedback.
Right.
Are we seeing this too? We're seeing like market feedback to these decisions these days, I think, too.
Well, which is why I think, there's a conversation about AI replacing so many jobs and replacing the human. And I think that us humans are going to see the more that it's implemented, the more how much more important the human touch is to that. And I don't know if I'm taking this conversation in a completely different direction, but I think, we can use AI to analyze customer feedback and help us more efficiently reply to it and really digest it. But I think that it's just Guy's point is, and I think I'm making the same point, and you might be too, is that the human touch is going to be really important, especially in more complex, more complex knowledge-based industries. So I think like when I look at the World Economic Forum, their projection for the top 10 skills for the next 5 years, 10 years, creative thinking is like at the top of the list. It outweighs analytical thinking, which we're all becoming even more analytical because of AI and other things and the more intelligence that we gather. But that creative thinking side of the brain is also going to be just as important, because that's how we reason, as a human. That's how we innovate as a human. That's how we create from scratch. All AI knows, I know it's going to get smarter, but all AI knows is what has already existed. The human is the one that has the imagination to build and create something new. I'll pause there.
That's okay. The
I
goal
love
is
it. Could I
dorm room
feed on
philosophy.
that?
Please.
Because it's so perfectly laid out to where thinking about scalability of systems and the numbers of people, a lot of that depends on like, are we scaling horizontally or vertically? And, most companies will do both. They'll attempt both. But if you can find a way to scale much more horizontally, then all you really need is a good base code. Like all complex systems still operate by very simple base codes and very simple sets of rules that permeate that system. And if the further you go vertically on a company, that complexity really gets out of hand. And then the bigger you get, the more bureaucratic it has to be. But if you keep it as horizontal as possible, it changes those laws a little bit. And I think it becomes a little bit simpler if you have an extraordinarily flat hierarchy on your system. Then it's a matter of humans interacting, but not necessarily having to speak to other humans, be told what to do. And then another set of managers over here trying to oversee that this set of managers got this set of people to do these things. And no one knows the customer except these people down here anyway.
Well, then I have a question though for you on top of that is then does this put into question the size of an organization? How big can an organization get if horizontal is better or more important than vertical?
I'm not sure either is better or more important. That's a really good question, because now you're trying to get to the root of which direction do we go. And how horizontal can you go before you have to go vertical and take that step up? And I don't know the answer to that. And I get asked that quite a bit because in our own company, it's how big do you guys want to get? Like, well, I don't know. We're still very small. But when we feel that pain, there'll be enough of us here to solve it together. And that's how we want to approach it. It's unfair for me to say, here's how it should look, because I haven't done that and I don't know. But can we act with integrity to solve it together? And if we can't solve it, then there's another problem to solve. How do we come up with the right questions on what should this look like? But it shouldn't be one or two people figuring it out sometimes.
Well, and the reason I asked the question is the more research I do on just what the future of work might look like, the idea pops up in my head that it brings into question the size of organizations and at what point is too big, because it does slow down innovation. If you think about Meta or Google, the big tech names, innovation becomes much harder when bureaucracy enters the system. And the bigger you get, you sort of kind of naturally come up with bureaucracies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just something that I contemplate. Is the future much smaller organizations because they are much more nimble, they can change faster, they can operate more quickly and more efficiently? I don't know the answer. It's just an idea that's been popping up in my head.
I love it because, I'm sorry, Matt, you were
No,
teeing up.
I was saying you go. I want to hear what you have to say about this. Is the future smaller?
I think we've maybe want to answer, why did it get big? What was the purpose of those economies to cause organizations to get huge? And can that be solved going smaller? Most likely can be. So these smaller pods of problem solvers, we can call them companies, problem solvers, deliverers of solutions. Yeah, if you can, and I believe we can, do this with a greater number of them, with fewer people, then you have the chance of running more experiments across an environment. Every company is always just running its own experiments constantly. Did this work? The market didn't like this. So the more experiments you have going on, the more you can get closer to some level of truth. If you have 2 or 3 social media giants, you're only running a few experiments. If you have several little pods of groups of people solving a problem together, you're running more experiments socially. You'll evolve as a species probably more quickly because you have more kind of subcultures growing. And I think about cultures versus subcultures, and Matt, I think you'll appreciate this too. We grew up with this counterculture. It was like this monoculture, and then there's a counterculture, and maybe the counterculture won because now I feel like we have like hundreds of subcultures, and we all find each other on the internet. Same can be true of companies, little tiny subcultures.
Is there a weird like subculture thing that is that part of this? So say I work for some giant company, and I say this as somebody who worked, like I was an independent contractor on the Death Star, making those decisions for a long time in my career. Is part of the thing that happens is even if you're part of a larger system, Lindsay, that you're actually looking for like those subcultures, both within your company and out of it, to just try to, because like you need feedback as an individual to figure this stuff out, I feel like.
Well, no, I think that's exactly right. And I was going to say, we're not saying, I don't know. I don't work inside of Meta or Google or whatever. They probably have smaller pods that are innovating on different projects, and so those subcultures probably do exist. And, the FP&A or accounting team is going to have a different culture probably than, say, the innovative lab inside of an organization. But all leading up to one main culture, And so I do think that's part of the question. Big organizations can exist with smaller organizations or cultures coexisting inside of them too. So it doesn't mean that it's big versus small. Maybe it's small and big together. So I think that you're kind of onto something there.
Guy, from your experience with work, because I feel like correct me if I'm wrong, are a lot of the people who you've teamed up with or you've built core planning around, are a lot of those people defectors of larger organizations that are seeking some of the autonomy?
It's about 50-50. We get a good number of us are career changers, and a good number we're working for the machine. And
so when you say career changers, you mean somebody who did one job and now decided to go become like an advisor or something.
Yeah. You see that
Okay.
quite a bit. Engineers, CPAs, people who say, hey, you know what, I'm good at this also. And
Hmm.
here's a path to accomplish that, and to do it on my terms and to do it slowly without any of the, silly quotas and things that this industry likes to throw onto people who are building. So it's a place for someone to come and just be them, but with the permission from others to do it at their own pace. This industry specifically doesn't like to give people permission to do it at a pace that makes sense. But if you can eliminate all the silly things that don't matter and all the fluff around things, and you get to what the base elements are, you can go slowly at something, and you can find your people the right way. And yeah, we won't pretend to have it figured out, but we're figuring it out, and that's all we can do for now.
Does pace or tempo or speed, and knowing that with yourself, like the pace that you like to work, the pace you like to seek feedback, have you bumped into that at all, Lindsay? Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, no, I think it does, because I feel like we are, as we think about the evolution of work, I think we're in this transitionary period where we're moving from the stagnant staircase, if you will, to a place where we're starting to see more possibilities, like exactly like Guy talked about, where you're able to take, I think the individual is able to take a little more ownership. They're able to work more on their terms than they have been able to in the past, but while aligning that with the staircase that they feel comfortable with in a way. And I think it's a transitionary period of really just opening minds and the imagination to what could the future be if I'm the type of person that wants that autonomy, that wants to be able to utilize my authenticity in my own space. What could that look like? Can I do it inside an organization? Can I do it on my own? I think we're just at this place where we're starting to like open the can of worms of possibilities. We're starting to see possibilities. Like I said before, we're getting a taste of ownership. We're getting a taste of working more so on our terms. And I think the gig economy did a great service for us in opening our eyes to that. There's a lot of those opportunities. You're still working for another organization, but you have a little more say in how much you're going to make, when you're going to work, all that stuff. And so I think that we're just like in this transitionary phase. Not that the staircase is ever going to completely fade away into the night. But I think that for different people, they need different things. And I think that's okay. And I think we're starting to find that and figure that out.
Guy, I'm really curious with, I want to stick on this pace thing for a second here. So in the figuring it out, in understanding, like you have to be in a place where the pace suits you. I think that's one of my big takeaways, like this stage of the conversation here. And that is such a profoundly perfect way to frame this. You're finding people who are leaving total other career paths and larger career paths because they go, I am good at something, and here is a pace where I feel like I can be good and creative and fulfilled by doing this thing.
Mm-hmm. You know what? If we think about pace, if you imagine substituting the word pace with, synchronizing with a vibration that suits you, and every one of us can kind of feel where it just feels right. And it could be pace, it could be, there's a synchrony going on to where when we're public about who we are, then we'll find our people and our people find us and we align. It's like you're tuning in to a radio, two sides of something synchronized, and then there's a connection made. And it feels right. And this is not my scientific observation. This is more of, a theory, but it's happened enough times that we've synchronized with the right people. And that can be in a large organization too. So I want to make sure we're careful not to knock on size as somehow good or bad. There's some big companies doing amazing things and have great people working for them. And Lindsay said something perfectly well. You can have subcultures and pods within. So if you're a large organization listening and you want to try to figure this out, just like Lindsay said, create space for pods to emerge, give them some autonomy, have another building, another annex where you're not even going to be over there like watching them. Just let them be, give them a budget, give them a few problems, and then stay out of the way. And they'll make some mistakes and it'll be great. And they might come up with something amazing because you weren't there watching over them. So it could be done from within. And It's just a matter of finding out, people of our generation, and us three are kind of unique. I think we're in the same kind of place career-wise. We've been doing this stuff long enough to observe and have theories, and we've seen the old ways quite a bit, but I still think we know where the future can go. We see that what's possible. We have some time to see it through. So it's a unique place. I know I'm drifting a little bit, but it's just being in the right place at the right time and synchronizing. And that comes back to pace. We all have our own pace, and mine's a little slower, and that's okay for me.
You're rattling along at a perfectly acceptable speed. Lindsay, I wonder too, some of this I think relates back to age. And I think guys kind of hinting at this point, like we're all in a similar demographic, but I feel like as we look up the ladder, as we look at those older, and as we look down at those younger, and certainly if you're just at the beginning of your career and you're looking all the way up, or if you're at the tail end of your career and looking all the way down, I feel like you have to understand this stuff. You have to understand these organizations and the pace thing and how vertical versus how horizontal is something structured. Do you feel like, is this one of the most important things we can understand as modern workers, just sort of what the landscape is of this whole mess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely different generations view work and the way it operates completely differently. I was actually reading last week, I think CNBC did a workplace study with SurveyMonkey, and it talked a lot about how, the Gen Zers, it's the same thing you always hear about them. A lot of them are saying they're just coasting at work versus thriving or disappointed or unhappy at work. They're just coasting, and they have different values than maybe our generation or the one above us. But I think what to me it says is that I think they're removing their identity from the tie to the workplace. Not completely, but for our generation, we learned you work hard, you do what you're told, you follow the rules, and you'll have success. And that is true. But I think they see the world in a different way. So because we see the world that way, we tie our identities much more closely to what we do. I mean, it's one of the first questions you ask somebody. You meet them at a cocktail party or whatever. What is it that you do? Or if you're in Manhattan, where do you live? But what do you do, right? And so I think that generation, though, that's probably not the first question they're going to ask. They're seeking fulfillment and purpose, and they want to connect themselves to the greater good of the world or the betterment of the world, which is great. And they are motivated, but they just see the world differently. They themselves, their identity is more about who they are. Like the word authenticity means a lot more to them than maybe it does our generation who's waking up to the idea of, I can be authentic. And so I do think that the generational thing is very important. I think organizations have to kind of take that into consideration when they're building out their talent. And I've been in bigger organizations where in meetings with the HR group, it's like, how do we not deal with, but how do we work better with younger generations, or how do we work better with older generations too? Because they all bring something to the table. And so we all just need to kind of just figure out how to best work with each other. And different generations have different ideas too. That's like the beauty of it as well. We always like to knock on, when the millennials are coming into the workforce, we're knocking on the millennials. They want too much freedom. They want this, they want that, the other thing. And you knock on them and they would call the lazy generation. And so it's just always the younger ones, they don't know what they're talking about, but they're learning and they have ideas. So let's embrace it. I don't know.
Let's just give the ball trophies. It worked before. Come on.
Just do it, you guys. It's funny, bringing up the generations. I always like to say, if you believe humans have progressed, really progressed over, I don't know, a couple 100,000 years, it didn't just all of a sudden stop with this new generation. They're probably really good at stuff. They're probably also smarter than us.
Are you sure? Have you spent time on TikTok?
I have seen, well, you know what?
Sure?
Can you imagine if TikTok were around when we were kids? I don't know. I won't pretend to not be a goofy teenager, but I still believe that humans do progress.
Absolutely.
And the younger generations are high probability going to surpass us on every way, and they're smart and they're different. And that is okay, because I'm different than my parents and they were different than theirs. And it's just the way it goes. So it's, progress. We don't like the way it looks all the time, but you're not stopping it. So you might as well learn to embrace it, and learn from each other.
And I think you can hire for it
Mhm.
too. I mean, I'm coming off of, I had a meeting this morning where a not long out of college colleague basically took 3 things that have been a thorn in all of our sides for months. And in 2 weeks on the job was like, oh, here's a report to solve that problem.
Mhm.
Lindsay, what about hiring for that? How do you think about, like, if you were giving advice to a company who is looking to hire and looking to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm talking about, empowerment.
Right.
You can give these younger generations that know how to use technology better than we do, right? I barely know how to log on to this river studio we're in, right? No, you can give them the problems, and it gives them empowerment to solve, make it easier, make it better. They're the ones dabbling around with what are ways we can use AI that makes it our jobs and lives a little bit easier. What are ways we can use an Excel spreadsheet? You know, I don't know. They have fresh minds, fresh out of college, fresh out of the internet. I don't know, but yeah, I think that you should absolutely be taking that into consideration and use it to your advantage. And use it to empower them. It'll get them off of that I'm just coasting mindset. It's like it gives them I'm making a difference, even if it's in a spreadsheet, you know?
Guy, because you invoked this word, I think you invoked the word coasting. I'd have to look
Mhm.
back and see who said it first. What's wild about this is, and I think you just revealed this to me here, Lindsay, too, in the way you said it. Coasting is I am allowing the pace to be set by somebody else without active involvement from my identity. If I can empower or suggest somebody actually just stops coasting and puts the effort in. And Guy, I feel like this is what you see. Like, this is people coming to core planning. When people show up there, it's going like, oh, no, I'm not going to coast. I want to go at my own pace,
Mhm.
but I want my foot on the accelerator and maybe my other foot hovering over the brake or the gears or whatever.
Right. And your
How do you
own
think
pace
about that?
doesn't have to mean slow. It doesn't have to mean slow. It can mean, it
Right.
just means it's yours. It could be fast. It could be whatever. And when you have,
This
I'll go
is
to
my
identity.
problem too.
This is
I
beautiful
go way
because
too fast.
you both teed this up so great. Identity. And Lindsay, you said identity. That for hundreds of years, people's identity was where they showed up, like where they're physically with, like who they're with. And the more digital we get, we're finding new ways to have our identities and identifying as, you know, a coffee drinker, whatever. Like, but we could be identifying ourselves however we want and still have a purpose for a mission. So that it comes back to like purpose. I'll work hard. I have my own pace, but I'll work 100 hours a week on something I really love. So will younger people, they will work really hard when they believe in what they're doing. They have the tools to do it. They're not afraid to make a mistake. And that's another thing too. There's this culture I think that we're getting away from of belittling errors, being upset with setbacks. Those are necessary to reveal things in the process. So having people feel the permission to make mistakes, to go at their pace, which might be fast if they believe in what they're doing, and being okay with setbacks that are made with good intention. Those are perfectly fine setbacks.
Yeah, and I think you need to like redefine. We're in the process, like you said. I think our culture is starting to slowly redefine the word failure, because failure or setback, I like that word setback, is it's something that you learn from. And the people that are most innovative, you see this in a lot of, you're probably familiar, Guy, with like entrepreneurs. They're not wired to see a failure. They could try a business that didn't make any money or was a money loser, and they just they realize it and they move on to the next thing. But in their mind, it doesn't register as this failure that they have to cry over and really be depressed about. They're just on to the next thing. They learned something in that
Mhm.
process and they're moving on. And I think that a lot of employees that work in bigger organizations are the same way, or especially leaders. It's the failure is part of the process and we learn as we go. And I think, just highlighting some of those, so-and-so had the courage to try this and it didn't quite work out, but one positive or two or three positives out of the experience was this, and we're going to use that in our next project. So there's always something to learn. And I think it's just that mentality of failure is okay.
How do you capture that, especially in a more horizontally distributed system? Like capturing the failures, capturing the feedback so that it's not disheartening. It doesn't break things. How do you think about that, Guy?
I, just being celebrating of those things and being public about it. So having an active communication line, we love Slack. Slack rooms can be full of fun. We have a success channel where we can talk about things that worked well or didn't, and you can study setbacks and you can learn from them. And if you bake that into your culture of failures are points of study material, then it just becomes part of the culture. And people are not only, they're not trying to hide those, they're trying to talk about them and say, hey, I tried this. It really did not work out well. Any other ideas? When we can laugh and move on. Most setbacks are not critical, especially ones made with good intentions. Good intention mistakes, we can do this all day. I do hundreds of them. They're great. It's okay. And in the critical ones, we'll fix together. But celebrating those in a way will help reveal them. And the more those you reveal, the more we can learn from them. It's this positive feedback loop of, hey, other people are talking about theirs and it seems to be fun and engaging. I'll talk about mine. And it comes back to this permission that we can give each other.
How do you think about it, Lindsay? Like as an organization thinks about its structure and how they talk about mistakes or failure along the way.
Yeah,
how do you think about best practices?
That's the hard thing about horizontal organizations. You have to be really intentional about communicating because you still need the knowledge that is happening in different parts of the organization, right? You're all learning something and bringing it together and moving towards the one goal that organization is really focused on is really important. So I think it is, whether it's Slack or you having monthly meetings to open the floor to bring examples in. I think it's really just those communications and that really becomes the most important thing when it comes to celebrating failures and celebrating successes. And then also reminding people that they have the support to, before they make a decision that they think might not work, there's a good enough probability that it might not go right, that they have the support to run the idea by certain people before they execute on it, and to make them realize too that all the really big decisions aren't your one person's decision, and so just really having that support system, I think, throughout.
When you think about a leader or a leadership team or something that sits towards the top side of, it doesn't have to be like way on some pedestal in like a vertical structure, but the people who help set the course for a team or a company or whatever else, would comment on the intentions required? Because I feel like we've covered a lot of variables in this conversation. The intentions of pace, the intentions of like giving feedback when you make mistakes. What are some of the best practices for a leader or a leadership team to have? Because I feel like this can get out of control if you're not really intentional. Go ahead, Guy.
Oh, not sure you wanted on this one, but when you mentioned intentional, and like you said, you have to have the right intention behind it. And to think of it, from which position are you communicating? If it's from a place of service because you want them to succeed, then you're just flipping this hierarchy in a sense of a good leader, especially in a horizontal structure, is there to enable and not necessarily to tell what to do. And it really depends on the organization. If it's a knowledge-based or creative-based organization, it's more enabling. If it's more of a linear industrial type thing, you kind of have to say, here's what you have to do in some respect. And there are tasks to accomplish. But leadership can be different things because different people like to be led differently. So it's really more of paying close attention on what people need and being okay asking them, how do you like to interact with me? And how do you want this conversation to go? And deliver upon that if you can, because people need different things. And the bigger you get, the more likely you're going to do it right for some and not right for others. So it's being very aware and listening and asking. So a leader should ask for feedback more than anybody.
Lindsay, what about you? Advice for a leader?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, I'm a big fan of servant leadership. And I think you have to have empathy to some extent. But I think it really is getting down to know your employees as best you can, but also giving leadership also needs some space and freedom to think and be innovative themselves too, and reflect on what is actually happening. Because I think a trend that we've been seeing over the last several years is the rise of what I call the manager-doer. I've written about this in my newsletter. And because organizations have gotten flatter, they've gotten leaner, everybody's a doer, everybody's doing something, right? But I think that there is significant value in the manager title is, managing individuals, but also assessing what's going well and what's not going well. Again, not that you put that all on the shoulders of one individual, but having somebody have the ability to think, I think is so important. I had a friend once who was a leader in a different organization who said, if you don't have time to think, you're not doing your job. And it sat with me because I feel like it really is so important. If you don't have that space to think about what's happened and what could happen, what we need going forward, and you're just so in the weeds of what we're doing right now, you get lost. So I think that's important too for leadership.
I think that's a perfect place to try to wrap this up because, man, I just feel like there's so much nuance around this, acknowledging how much the work environment has changed and how much that affects whether you're a leader or whether you're trying to get off. So I'm going to read some notes. So we're going to tell the people where to find you. So this is what I wrote down in this conversation today. I love how we started, Lindsay, with this knowledge-based from industrial-based systems switch that we've gone through about how the systems are still industrial, but we've been breaking into this knowledge-based system and it's friggin' hard. And that's a lot of the friction that we're feeling. Guy, you brought up the word permission, which we hit 200,000 times through this conversation for a reason, because we need not just the permission to do our work, but we need to understand the permission who gives it, especially when it's us. We're looking for, as Lindsay, you raised the point of where's the room for creativity or organizations giving power, the space, the time to employees and realizing that autonomy, that agency, that authenticity is actually going to come back and benefit the whole company overall if it's guided with intention. Special points on the end there. Guy, you made a point about creativity meaning different things to different people. I think that is enormously important. We can't just throw words like this around and forget what they mean. There's real power in remembering they mean different things to different people. You added that we need lenses to see these things through. Lindsay, you introduced this idea of perspectives and the complexities of both individuals and groups. Guy, you said about being human is what makes us better and that the key is feedback. That imperfect feedback is what drives progress. Stuff getting messed up makes you go forward. And Lindsay added that talking to customers, getting market feedback, not just leader to employee, but leader to employee to outside customer, vendor, whatever else. That whole ecosystem approach, I think, is fascinating here. Lindsay, you talked about how big can an organization get. Guy brought in the horizontal versus vertical aspects. We talked a lot about this. I'm going to be coming back to this to hear it. We talked about finding subcultures inside and outside of your organization. If you haven't checked out like Stanley McChrystal's Team of Teams stuff from years ago and how that played out in the 90s in Iraq, Afghanistan, and then in the early 2000s, got some fantastic literature on this. The permission of pace. I love this idea of staircasing. I was thinking about trying to rush somebody up or down the stairs and not only how dangerous that is, but then also the commercial for like the old person on like the stair thing that goes up. You can't rush grandma on this. I made a note to myself about playing together, like pace and setting the pace is also a rhythmic thing. There's a whole playing in a band or musical element to this. Again, you don't want to be rushing people, playing to the beat of your drum. I'm going to torture that for a second. You don't want to make people march to your drum and then do something crazy with it and speed it up. You also don't want to be playing too slow and have them going like, you're friggin' killing me, Matt. Like, why can't we play this faster? We talked about coasting. I think this one's really, really interesting to me. This idea of, Lindsay, you said it like this. You said coasting is to remove identity from work, which makes me think about if you're coasting, you're actually, and there's two ways to coast. You could coast at the top and be like, I'm checked out. Give me the profits. Do this thing for me. Or you can coast at the bottom. My identity is not invested in this thing. I give two craps about how well this comes out and whatever else. Both of those are an identity problem. That's fascinating. I made a note to myself here that the old employee coasting and younger employee coasting, that's the new East Coast, West Coast beef. I'm going to let you guys decide who Biggie or Tupac is in that scenario, but I do think that's fun. towards the end there, we talked about identity again. And Guy, you said identity used to be where you showed up. And I wrote down, but purpose can't be local. Purpose can be online. Lindsay, this is what you're writing about in so much of your stuff. Identity doesn't just have to come where you're in physical space. You can find other ways to create that space, to create that pacing. What counts is finding those points of making mistakes to give feedback. We talked about failure. We talked about setbacks. We talked about how the key is that you're part of that process of giving that feedback. If you're not giving feedback, you can probably coast. If you're actively giving feedback, it's really hard to coast. And then from the top down, leaders with their intentions, which becomes the most important thing. Leaders have to be intentional. We've got the manager-doers, yes, but if you're a manager-doer, there's probably some manager-don'ter situations that you got to inject in this thing, because let your people be people. Big final point, human touch, more important, the more complex the world gets. Staying human, not running too hard, not being obsessed with hustle, being human and finding the right pace, find your band of brothers, set your own rhythm. But then you got to think like a song. So, Guy, do us a favor. This has been an absolute pleasure. Where can the people find you? Where can they learn more and follow you and all the good things?
Well, easy to look me up. There aren't too many Guy Penns out there. Just, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. It's Twitter still. Okay. And you can find me at Core Planning. But thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. Lindsay, what about you? Where can the good people find you?
Yeah, same. I'm on LinkedIn mostly, but my market thoughts are on Twitter. And I've got my blog, The Shift. It's at Lindsay, www.lindseybell.me. Lindsay spelled with EY, LINDSEY, bell.me.
Well, I need to thank you guys so much for joining me. This is Just Press Record on the Cultish Creative YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, all the things below. Thanks, guys, for coming out today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Ziegler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.